Okay, so thanks for joining us for this remote fireside chat. My name's Jenny. I'm one of the directors at Steps, and I'm joined by some fantastic colleagues and collaborators to hear some insights and some experience today. So without further ado, I'll ask people if they can introduce themselves, please. Anju, if we could start with you.
Yeah, sure. You gave it away, Jenny. My name is Anju Sethi, and I'm here to talk about, what a great partner can do for D&I efforts.
I'm Alexia Della Valle. I'm one of the client relationship directors here at Steps. I've been here for 12 years, and Anju and I have worked together for quite a long time in a number of different organizations, and we wanted to kind of share a bit our story. And I've worked with Mark as well on a number of projects, and we thought it'd be great to have him on this as well.
My turn. Hello, I'm Mark Field. I'm an associate at Steps, have been so for a number of years, worked on many projects. I'm a lead facilitator, and I also help with some of the program designs and some of the script writing. And yes, hopefully I can bring some sort of what it's like on the front line of D&I programs to be delivering. So I deliver the programs as well. So we've got lots of experience of what it's like actually delivering them. So yeah, should be fun.
Thank you very much. Great. So we've got a real full house, which is fantastic. So let's dive straight in then now that we've heard from everyone. Anju, coming to you. So you've carved yourself a fantastic and inspiring career in the D&I space over the years, working for a number of organisations, global remits and so on. I'm just keen to kind of take a step back, right back to the beginning of that career, and thinking about what was available in the D&I space at that time in terms of people development.
That is such an interesting question, because I think, honestly, for those who are listening and have been around for a long time in D&I, it's almost safe to say there was nothing in this space at the beginning. I'm talking about roughly 12 years ago. In fact, even the understanding of D&I was, you had to kind of, every conversation, you had to define what diversity is, you had to define what inclusion is and how they're different. And the starting point was just way behind where we are right now. I first got introduced to D&I when I was running my own business, my own HR consulting firm, and we were taking this to senior HR leaders and CEOs and saying, hey, D&I could potentially be your differentiator in the next 5 years. And like I said, we were introducing this topic. But at the beginning, for a number of years, the conversation was only centered around simply understanding bias. And even understanding and creating acceptance that everybody has bias, because it was often misunderstood as if you have biases, you're a biased person, which had been used before in a very negative tone. And so I think the first few years were just educating people that everyone is biased and it's not a bad thing. It's just human.
Yeah, and taking away some of the stigma, I imagine, around the fact that it's less accusative and hopefully more towards the kind of the positive benefits of recognizing that and doing something with it. And so in terms of discovering drama then, is that something that you discovered fairly early on, or was it something that you came to a bit later?
I did discover it early on, but not in an organization setup. So I was learning psychology on the side, and a lot of the therapeutic treatments that I was interested in involved drama, psychodrama, and just actual use of Gestalt theories and stuff like that. There was drama involved in a variety of ways. So I knew drama had the power to recreate a scenario and reshape how a mind thinks and what's embedded and what's, deeply held as beliefs. But drama is a strange topic to, I can't think of a conversation with a CEO saying, hey, let's try some drama. Are you up for some acting? It's just such a weird topic to bring in. So I knew that drama is powerful. I was, desperately looking for a way to bring it into organizations and looking for a partner who could travel that journey of understanding drama for its technique, but then being able to bring it into a corporate setup, which is in one sense quite reserved, unlike the arts and the dramatic fields.
Great. And so in terms of when you first came across Steps, then I think that was probably at one of the client dinners, if I'm right, I think. Alex, do you want to sort of expand a bit more on what those are and the kind of the purpose behind them a bit?
Yeah, of course. And I was trying to remember, Anju, how we invited you to one of them, but it's just something we've been doing at Steps, I think for 5 years now, where we've been inviting different clients from different organizations who do work within the same, so be it D&I or is it HR or within L&D, but just to bring people together to just talk about, well, what are the burning platforms this year? What's been on people's agendas? How are they, what solutions they've been looking, they found, what are the obstacles that they've been facing? And it's a great opportunity for people to kind of just have an opportunity, I guess, to share with people who might not be working with them day to day, but actually you find that you work in totally different sectors and you've got a different population that you're working with, but actually a lot of the issues might be the same, or where you are on that journey might be very similar. And we use that as Steps also as a way to then think, well, what do we want to focus on in the next year? Because we've looked, as you were saying, Anju, D&I has changed quite a lot through the years in what it's been called, or the way it's been looked at from kind of the protected characteristics, and then instead looking at inclusion in a slightly different way. So those conversations have always been very helpful to kind of get a sense of how it's morphing and what it might look like in the upcoming year.
Yeah, I actually think I was, Jenny, I actually think I was an accidental invite to that dinner. I don't think Alex and others were particularly thinking of inviting me. I just accidentally ended up at that dinner, but it turned out to be one of the most fortunate meetings. And I actually think, Alex, it probably was your first or maybe second such hosting, which is why I made it, because you were still figuring out who should be in
Oh, great. Well, I'm so glad you did. Excellent. And in thinking, the thing about what you said, Alex, in terms of the journey that we've seen in D&I and the progression, I'm kind of keen to turn back to the drama side of things and to think, what is it about drama that makes it so powerful? And really interesting, Anju, that you came to it through more of the sort of psychology lens, you said. So we're kind of interested in that sentiment of why drama is so powerful for change.
Look, in psychology, it's used, you're all aware, but it's used very liberally to help people recreate a scenario. Some of the techniques that I found exceptionally powerful was that in the recreation, you become a witness to what you've experienced. And oftentimes I use the word issue, but I don't mean it as an issue, but oftentimes the barrier to recognizing things is that we're having that experience. We're not witnessing an experience. When we witness an experience, we know what's right and wrong. If I saw something wrong happening as I was passing by, I absolutely know it, But when I'm in that experience, that recognition isn't immediate because a lot of things are going on. I'm processing stuff, I'm taking in, my mind is occupied in many other things. And drama is the one format that allows for everyone to be a witness, the victim, the perpetuator, the onlooker, the bystander. Everybody can be a witness to what's going on. And when you witness something, when you see it, you can't unsee it. When you have to then give a true recount, like you do in a court, right? If you're a witness, then suddenly you've been faced with the truth. And I think this is in my opinion, drama is the purest form to take you out of your experience into a witness format, then change the dialogue and then come back into the same narrative.
Alex, I don't know if you want to expand a bit as well in terms of from the kind of change piece, and I guess the experience that Steps has had with organizations. What is it about drama that sort of has the power to unlock change and potential within organizations, do you think?
Yeah, I think there's a number of things. I mean, we talk in our, if you want to really achieve change, it's to Anju's kind of point, that first step of seeing it, so witnessing it, is so important in being able not only to see the current reality, but also to see yourself and see what are the behaviors that you might be very proud of, and what are some of the behaviors that actually maybe have just come out of habit, but that seeing them and holding up that mirror kind of makes you question, well, why do I do that? And actually, maybe it's not so helpful. And trying to see then what the future could look like. So what could a more inclusive environment look like? So in our kind of steps to change approach, just 4 different steps. The first one is around see it. And I think the power of drama and holding up that mirror is one, as we were saying, the kind of see it. So the visceral connection that you get when you see something, once you've seen it, as you're saying, you can't unsee it. But it's also that immediacy. If you're going to talk about what does it mean to be inclusive, or you're going to talk about, well, what do we need to do realistically within this organization if we want to shift the dial on the culture or some of the behaviors? In seeing it so directly, it's so easy to then springboard into that discussion, because you're talking about the practical things that could be done differently. And it's quite, to talk about it theoretically, and maybe to Anju's point earlier around kind of biases, to talk about that there are different biases and this is what they are. Theoretically, we can get a lot of that stuff. It's then, well, what does it look like practically? And drama is a really great tool to kind of springboard that straight into an intellectual exploration and discussion around, well, what do we do now that we've seen how we are? What do we want to change?
Thanks. And Mark, I think picking up on your point earlier about being the boots on the ground, it's a great analogy. I'm just keen, from your experience as a kind of designer and writer of some of these programs, in your view, what is it about the kind of writing process and that kind of the research and development process to get, I guess, under the skin in a way that you sort of expressed when you were saying about being the boots on the ground, in terms of surfacing some of the those truths and behaviors within an organization? How does that come about from a kind of design perspective?
Yeah, that's a very interesting and difficult question to answer. Specificity is absolutely key. And like has been mentioned earlier, when you're in the experience, you can't see what it looks like. It's like, have you ever seen yourself on CCTV or ever heard yourself recorded? And there's this whole other angle of yourself that you've never seen before, and it's almost unrecognizable to yourself. And you kind of look at it very curiously and sort of trying to figure out who that is, because you're just seeing things from where you are. And I think that can definitely be the case for most other organizations and for most people, really. You only see things from your own perspective. So to be able to look at it from another perspective and as we say, sort of challenge those entrenched beliefs or biases or whatever that might be, to try and find some new ways of working. And you do that through initially just talking to the members of the organization, finding out what their experience is, finding out what their viewpoint is. And then you kind of collect a few stories and things, and then patterns begin to form. And you begin to see things that are repeated, and you're like, oh, okay, well, these are the themes that this company is carrying or suffering from, or whatever it might be. These are the things that come up time and time again. And then you have to make it very, very specific to the individuals, and you have to make it relevant to the people who are watching it, because the more relevant to them it is, the more it kind of hits them exponentially. The more they're like, oh my God, that's me, or oh my God, I've been in that meeting. It's something that they can do. So it's the sort of layer of the stories that you hear, the patterns that come up, the people that you meet, and then you kind of gather all this information. You're like, okay, well, what is it that we're really, really trying to, what are the big questions we're trying to ask here? And I think one of the things that I always loved about the work that Steps did, even before I joined, was the fact that they're able to kind of make that so that it's not pointing the finger. It's not personal. You have fictional characters from a parallel universe, so people are able to look at it objectively and not feel accused, which can happen sometimes if you're in a role play situation or something like that. And it can be uncomfortable. It can be revealing some difficult things. And I think it's good that we are external and we're able to come in and look at it from an objective point of view, because yeah, like Anju said, when you're in it, you can't see it.
People have to be able to see stuff, but in a way in which they can digest it and do something. That you don't want them to throw up because it was so much, but you also don't want them to walk away feeling comfortable and patting themselves. Oh, it's not too bad. Actually, we're much better than others. And which is where Steps and Mark are just spectacular, because they, you guys bring that balance so well of, let's not shy away from what's not nice, but let's not do it in a way in which people just, people look away because it's too much. It's based on true events, but it's not filled with gore and blood.
Yeah, and I think, it's interesting because we still get that in the room, right? Where you have someone going, this doesn't happen here. It's really not relevant to us. But what the magic is when there's someone then next to them that goes, but I see that every day. I was in that kind of meeting just 2 days ago. So I think there's also the wisdom of the crowds, as it were, about all being together and experiencing this, about hearing other people. To your point, Mark, you don't know all the perspectives, you only see your own. And even some people who walk in and kind of go, the drama, this is just drama, it's just fiction, to then have a colleague actually say how real it is to them. That also has a power, especially when we look at things like bullying and harassment as well. Like if you've not experienced that, you might not feel that that's relevant to you, but actually it's within the culture. And what can you do there as a bystander as well, if you're not directly involved?
It's, it's bypassing that human tendency to view ourselves in a better light than anyone else does. We do 360s, for example, all the time, right? Self-assessments are almost always a little bit better than others' assessment of us. I think time and again in working with Mark and Alex, we come back to that thing of the intention not matching the action. People believe, the reason people have, like when they see this, they're shocked because that was never their intent. And then when they look at that, they go, oh my God, the purity of their intention makes them believe that their action is also good. And they just don't match in most cases. In all of, like most of us, they don't match all the time.
It sounds to me like the kind of spirit of the partnerships was there from the get-go. But I'm curious, in thinking about what makes a great partnership, whether, Anju, you have a view on things that you particularly found with Steps that fit the bill in terms of partnership.
I think so. Steps is a partner that I've come back to again and again, and I will do as well in the future. And there's some reasons for that. I think when you work with an external partner on changing behaviors within an organization, it's without making it sound too mushy, it's like, you're bringing in a tutor to help with your child. You really want them to understand what's important for you. You really want them to understand your child. You really, you've got all of this insight and information that matters in actually creating the change. What I didn't want is a partner who has a great model and want to shove it down my child's throat. I wanted somebody who takes the time to understand. I think I'm going to kill this analogy because I'm taking it too far, but you know what I mean? Like, I really wanted a partner who comes and takes the time to understand, my organization and the organizations that I work for and the context, and which is like over and over again what I've found in this partnership with Steps. And then create something. Of course, Steps is an expert in certain things, and that's why I rely on that expertise. But using that insight to marry with the expertise to create something that's brilliant and unique for that organization, because it's context-based, not model-based and content-based. And I've had that over and over again, and which is why I'm hooked and I keep coming back, because I know when I bring a problem to Steps, they're not going to jump at it and say, oh, we know we've done this for 10 organizations and here's a model that you can apply. I will change the logo on the PPT so it will make it look like it's a customized. It's none of that, it's absolutely creating something from the scratch, and I love that, and that's important in a partnership for me.
Thank you. Mark, I'm keen to hear from you a bit on that in terms of how it felt to you as a kind of a co-collaborator on the ground, and what that partnership felt like as it went along to craft the program.
When you're bringing in a tutor, I think it was a really good analogy. And I think one of the things that we try to work towards at Steps is to not have all the answers, because I don't think you can possibly have all the answers. I think, we are coming to this. I think, who's it? I think Jack Nicholson, one of my favorite actors, said, I'm just here to start the conversation. I'm not here to give you all the answers. And that's what we do when we sort of go into these organizations, is we there start the conversation with the drama. That's what sparks the conversation, the discussion. And then that was, beautifully shaped by Anju and Francis as it was kind of taken here, there. And there were some really difficult topics that were lent into, some things that people don't get to discuss in their day-to-day working lives. And I think what Anju said as well about it being bespoke and it being an original means you're not doing a one-size-fits-all. You're not trying to sort of, look, this model, this dogma, this ideology, whatever it is, it's going to save your company. We've tried it a million times. People are unique. They are, that might sound obvious, but you do need to deal with them and deal with that uniqueness and deal with each conversation. And I think keeping it present and keeping it live was something that Anju and Francis really helped us enable us to do. And then as the conversations would sort of take off and the discussions would go here and there, because it was different every time, we were able to sort of ride that wave and address the things that were important to the people in that room, rather than trying to sort of, well, look, we've got to get these 4 points across, or we need to get these things. It's like, if there was a topic that needed to be discussed and we got the chance to discuss it, and it's very rewarding to have people come up to you afterwards and say, thank you. We've never had a chance to sort of really talk about those things before.
I think, Mark, you've just reminded me actually that it isn't just like you helping customize a program for the companies that I'm, bringing to you. I think it's also, I remembered all of a sudden we had a design, we had a script that worked for 2 workshops, and then we went to the US, and the night before rewriting the script because, the US colleagues had a very different context to our Europe colleagues. And so it's also a continuous partnership. It's not like at the beginning, hey, now this is ready for this organization. It's, reiterating it and getting it right and having that impact.
Just picking up on what you were saying about the kind of the trust and some of those sensitive things that sometimes can arise in these programs, or can arise from the experiences that people are opening up about and speaking up about, which is fantastic. From a partnership perspective there, is there anything specific that you kind of valued about having a partner at that level in terms of the influencing and discussions at more senior levels?
I think more now than before. To be honest, in the first few instances, I didn't even reveal that we're going to have any drama. I was a believer, but I didn't. I don't mean to say I didn't see any value in creating other believers, but I knew that they would probably see the value once they come to the program, rather than me spending lots of energy in convincing them upfront that drama is a great tool to get there. I think where it is critical is that I always start the first program with the senior leaders, because they have to absolutely understand what's going on in that, when we're using drama as a tool. Because if they do, then they will advocate it, and their advocacy is the most important. And so for me, the first couple of programs, which are with the most senior leaders, end up being the most important because they set the tone for the organization. And in that, the partnership has been really incredibly helpful because sometimes we've also done like a different script for senior leaders and a different script for the rest of the organization because the viewpoints are different, the points of view are different. And in that sense, it's been brilliant because with Mark and Alex, we've written scripts knowing fully well that this one will only be used for one workshop, but will have an impact in the rest of the organization that will be almost of equal value, if not more. So I think that's helped. I'm past that point of trying to prove that diversity matters and inclusion matters. I really don't want to take any papers saying, hey, if you do this, your board will make better decisions. If you are a senior leader at this point that still doesn't get it and needs a business case, then, I'd really question if you should be leading a business at all. I think we're well past that. And as a D&I leader, I just feel like claim the space and and move it forward. I have very little patience in terms of trying to prove the rationale for doing this.
Yeah, I love that. Claim the space. Alex, in terms of the work that you do as a client relationship director with that you have done with Anju and that you do with other D&I professionals and other organizations. Is there anything from your perspective in terms of partnership that you think is kind of unique and most valuable in terms of the partnership towards creating something?
No, I think most of the stuff has been said. I think the kind of co-creation, I think spending a lot of time at the beginning to really understand, well, what are the learning objectives? What does success look like? And I think to Anju's point around doing something different for the exco or the senior leaders, I think that's important because sometimes what we find is senior leaders will come to the first session because they want to be seen to be supporting this, but for them, it might feel like an initiative that's for others. And I think the real work of the partnership is to work at that beginning to kind of go, from the exco and from the senior leaders to understand what is their role and what do they need to do in terms of owning this for themselves? What might need to be different in the way that they interact with people around them? And so actually to kind of have that courage, I think, up front to define, well, what does success mean all across the organization, not just in some pockets that might seem the ones that are more problematic, but actually for everyone to kind of see that mirror. And to take that ownership. And we found, we've done research papers on what is a successful program, a change program, when is it successful and when it fails. And one of the key reasons why a program tends to fail is because the senior leadership might be saying the right things, but they're actually not walking the walk. So I think that we've always worked very well with Anju together to kind of really kind of hold the toes to the fire to the leadership to go, we need to see your belief and presence and willingness to change if we're going to be looking at this and taking it seriously. And in terms of the partnership, I think also, just as has been said, but kind of that not coming in with preconceived ideas of because we've worked together somewhere else, this is how we think it's going to work here, but really kind of coming in to go, well, let's find out, let's do the research. And the research is going to tell us what are the things that maybe are the blockers, or what are the things that, need to be looked at in terms of inclusion. And that's always the kind of, then how do you make that creatively in terms of designing it and delivering it in a way that is authentic to kind of what we've wanted to achieve, and being also aware that this is one program in a multi-pronged approach on creating a more inclusive environment. This is not going to be the one thing that's going to solve everything. And again, working together to go, well, strategically, where should this be placed? What's happening before? What's happening after? What's the other noise that's happening around the organization around this? So that what we do really has maximum impact.
With the fact that experiential learning is so, if you like, intangible, I was just curious whether you had ever experienced a difficulty in kind of bringing the concept of drama to an exco, and how you overcame that.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's, you don't go to an exco or your CEO and say, hey, I want to do some drama. And it just, I mean, I can see that conversation sliding down fairly quickly. I can't think of any CEO who's up for some drama. At least I've not come across them. But I think, look, as soon as you start to talk to them about a tool that can help and give them some of the understanding of why that tool might work, then they're up for it. And I think in talking to senior leaders, you have to help them understand how the odds are stacked in on their side when you're going to consider a tool. I mean, that's typically what I do. I help explain how this stacks it up in terms of what we're trying to achieve, and the intangibility of behavior change, because everybody also changes in a different way, right? They might get the model the same way, but they might experience and express it very differently once they're out there. So ultimately you're creating a perception of leveling the playing field.
And you're building trust, right? I mean, I think that's one of the things that we all experience, whether that's initial client meetings, whether that's talking to senior leaders, or whether that's actually delivering the program to the delegates, or even creating the program, even internally. You're building these bonds of trust so that you can wade into difficult waters, and that can feel like a big gamble sometimes. But I think our experience, while it always does feel a little bit revealing, a little bit vulnerable, that courage that is required to actually get into these topics is always worth it. Like it's really venturing into some difficult areas, and you're dealing with people, right? People are organisms; they're not mechanisms.
Yeah.
And a lot of organizations, think, well, hang on, they do this job and they do that, and it can seem very functional, very binary. But people feel different on different days, dependent on what's happening in their lives or how they react to certain, and if you can have a bit of a language for how you interact and how you work together, then you can really, get that extra 10%. And, organizations that I've worked with you in, Anju, have been exceptional. They're exceptional organizations. They intelligent people, they work incredibly hard, they do really well, but it's that little extra part that you really want to kind of push through to.
Absolutely. I mean, inclusion is not an intellectual or a business challenge. Inclusion is a psychological challenge. It's deep-seated beliefs and deep-seated experiences that have led you to believe that things should be a certain way and people should fit a certain box and things, blah, blah, blah. Therefore, the solution cannot be intellectual and the solution cannot be business. The solution has to be a psychological solution that can help unlock some of those things, and that's what I mean by stacking it up. Like if you cannot open a lock no matter how hard you try with the wrong key.
And it's changing those habits, isn't it, as well? I think one of the things that Anju and I explored when we were developing some of the last programs was, it's not enough to have, we're a very inclusive organization down in the foyer. We've got our values pinned up on the wall or, on the reception or whatever. It's like the daily habitual approach to how do I actually integrate these values? How do I live up to what I'm saying we do actually work with? It's the nitty gritty is tough. It's really tough.
You can give people the opportunity to have that conversation and to be vulnerable in the safe hands and in the space where you're able to do that. But then what we also work together is, well, what are the processes around that? What is something going to change? What does it mean when you come out of that room? It's so easy to fall into habits again, especially if you're part of the in-group. Why push yourself to kind of understand what it means to be in an out group? So I think it's all of those things to think, well, how is the organization going to support that change, which is going to feel a bit mechanical in the beginning until it becomes that kind of unconscious competence.
Yeah. And I think, drawing on what's been said about the kind of, I guess, the sort of very human and psychological approach in terms of that journey towards inclusion, and thinking about how drama is almost quite universal in terms of its reach, I guess, in terms of different cultural understanding, different nuances depending on geographies, territories, sectors, but there's a kind of universality, I guess, to drama that people can connect with and have that kind of emotional connection. So Anju, you've worked in a really distinct range of organizations, as Mark alluded to, so telecom, retail, now in tech. So I'm just interested from the kind of inclusion challenge in those different and very varied organizations. Were there patterns that were similar? Were there distinct differences?
The answer is yes and no. Yes, there are like differences, and different aspects of inclusion are important. Like in some of the sectors I worked in, for example, retail, being young can sometimes be a slight disadvantage, or not having enough tenure, because typically people will have worked in the same industry for a long time. And so, helping understand that good ideas can come from anywhere, or removing those kind of biases. And, whereas in the tech industry or gaming, which is even more, even younger than tech itself, it's very different. You have very, very young people. And actually, if you're slightly older, you might feel a certain bias against you. But I think the nuances are different, and there are different areas of focus where you want to really target, I suppose, the script and the conversation. But ultimately, I think the uniting factor is that there's bias everywhere, because there's human beings everywhere. Like every I obviously I'd say this, being from HR, but I think every business problem is actually a people problem at the heart of it. And as long as there are people, there will be bias. And as long as there's bias, there will be need to talk about it and open it up, because only in awareness we become, we have a chance at inclusion. So I'm sorry, I'm giving a very consultant type of answer, which actually you guys should be giving, not me, but the answer is both yes and no. Because it's a relevant topic no matter where you are. It might have slightly different nuances.
Just thinking about that, I know that the program that was recently delivered at King was delivered originally as a live program and co-facilitated as a live program, and happened in global regions, as you've both spoken about. But very quickly, obviously, in light of what happened from the end of 2019 and into 2020 and the rise of COVID, had to pivot very quickly and become a virtual program. And I'm just really interested in that transition, I guess. From your perspective, Anju, it'd just be really interesting to know the kind of thought process behind that decision to move very swiftly to find a different platform, and how did you get that impetus within the organization to make that change so swiftly?
I think, to be honest, at first I was like, this is going to pass. Like I remember walking out on the first day when we shut our offices. I think it was 13th or 14th of March or something like that. I haven't even brought my boots back. Like I have four pairs of boots still underneath my desk, because I just thought we'll be back in a week or two, this cannot go on beyond that. And so I think the first 4 to 6 weeks, I was just like, the world's going to open back up, and, everything is going to go back to normal. So there's no need to change anything. Let's just delay a few programs and we'll get back to it. But I think something as critical as this, if you're pausing beyond 4 to 6 weeks, then you're almost starting to undo some of the fantastic work and effort you've done, because, not directly, but indirectly, you're telling your organization and people that when a crisis hits, I will deal with important things, and this isn't one of them. And I wasn't prepared to, I just wasn't prepared to be part of that kind of message. It wasn't like anybody's thinking like that or wanting to, but it is what it comes across, right? You're making stuff happen that's important. And also I'm just an impatient person. So I couldn't think of waiting patiently for things to change and then I'll make a decision. So we moved quite swiftly. I did have apprehensions about, can this format work in a virtual way? Because so much of it is reliant on what you're experiencing in the room and what you're seeing and all of that. So I did have apprehensions. But very quickly, Alex and team mobilized and started to think about how to do this virtually. We did a couple of trials as well to just see, how the experience feels like. And then I think on both sides, like on my side and also on the STEP side, we were just waiting to learn as we trial it out. And it's just been fantastic that to realize that it does work in this format as well. When the world opens up, would I want to do it face to face? Yes, but that's because of my own bias, not because of the fact that it's more effective that way or any of those thoughts that I originally had.
Mark, coming to you from your experience directly kind of on the ground, as it were, with the design of the program, how did it feel to you to have to make that leap and that transition to make it virtual?
It was very sounds cheesy, but it was very exciting, and it was very creative, exploring what it's like to have to work on your own. And one of the things that people spoke about is there is almost zero time or zero inclination to have social sit downs, even if they're virtual, to ways to connect people. And as I said to you guys, when people were sort of talking about, oh well, we'll get rid of that 50,000 square feet office that we have, or whatever it might be, and it's like, well, it's just hang on, because those little connections, those casual connections that you have with people before the meeting, after the meeting, at the kitchen, while getting a coffee, whatever it might be, they can be the real golden nuggets that really solve a problem. So either virtually or live, finding ways for people to connect and build new habits where they're able to connect and work together better is I think really fundamental. And it was great, and the more and more we did it, the more fun it got, and I think a lot of people got a lot out of it, and it was very different to anything else, any sort of PowerPoint experience that they were having in other get-togethers. So it was a lot of fun, and it was nice to kind of create a separate product in that sense. And then it's like, well, look, here's the single, but you wait until the live album show comes out. You'll love that.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, I think it's interesting that it was a challenge we were all kind of grappling with, not only within our own organizations, but from your perspective, Alex, and I guess from Steps' perspective, working with a number of different organizations who were all coming across that same question. And I imagine there were clients that hit the pause button and others that took a leap of faith. And how was that, and how was it for Steps at that time, thinking about that, a big change? We're an organization that specializes in change, but it was one of the biggest changes for us as well.
Thank you, Jenny, because I think it's exactly that. Like, it was we found ourselves obviously from one day to the next. You couldn't do anything live anymore, and we did have some clients who still now are kind of waiting to go back and do things live, and are kind of now they're creating programs that in a way are temporary until they're able to be back in the room. And we're talking a year and a half, of before that might be able to happen. So I think what was really great was Anju and Francis's just courage to just want to take that leap of faith and try it, even if we didn't know how good the platforms were. How was it going to work? We were doing a one-day program. How do we reduce it to 2 hours? What are we going to lose out? What can we gain? And we were just learning as we were doing. And I think, for us as an organization, for Steps, it's been such an amazing, how quickly we've learned, from one day to the next. We had to totally change the platform on which we did things, and change the mechanics of how a lot of our methodologies can work. on a different platform. And so to learn how to do that, and then to learn to how do you keep the fun element of it? How do you keep the nuances and the reality of it? You know, all these things, just learning how to do them in a different way. And then if you add to that all the different platforms that have all of their technical challenges that go with that, it's been a real journey, but it's been with thanks to clients like King that we've been able to give ourselves the opportunity to practice and to learn, and to actually, as to Mark's point, create something that actually within the virtual world is really engaging, and gives people the chance to not just be talking about work, because I think that's something as well that's happened is, once it's about working virtual, there is no time for any of the pre-post or let's just have a chat kind of conversations. Everything is back-to-back meetings. So to actually create a space where you can sit back and actually talk about how does it feel to be at home? You know, do you feel that you're missing out on things because maybe you're not on that call, and talking about these kind of in and out groups, levels of bias that you might be feeling. What does it mean to be a parent in the pandemic? How is that different? So all of these things, I think it's a real safe space to do that actually we have even less of than we had when we were all in the office together.
And I guess in some ways as well, what's quite unique about the experiential approach, although it is using a kind of virtual platform, if you like, is that it isn't that faceless webinar that you can't interact, where your camera isn't on and you can't speak, and those sessions are still very interactive in terms of the ability to have a voice in that virtual space and to engage in a more active way at a time where probably we're all a bit starved of those social connections and that a time with our teams and things. So thinking about that and kind of, as we're kind of drawing to a close on that journey, bringing us up to kind of current day, if you like, from each of you, it'd be great to know your kind of reflections on this extraordinary year and where we go from here, really. Anju, if that's not too big a question, it'd be great to know if you have any.
I mean, it's like a life question. I could take like 5 hours now thinking, reflecting on this. But look, the year started, and I don't know if you guys felt it, but I just heard so much about, hey, all of a sudden it's level playing field because everybody, because, in the tech world, half the people are like, you globally spread, all of that. Some people are at home, some people are in a different country. And so what ends up happening is you have 10 people in a meeting, in a room, 2 people on Zoom, and, it's just the spread is so much. And all of a sudden, when everyone went to home, it felt like an equalizer, in March, because now everybody was a small box on a screen, and therefore, people in the room didn't have more of a say than people on a call and stuff. So in the beginning, it just felt like, oh, this is such an equalizer. It's really, given everybody an equal amount of space to claim. And then, of course, in May, we had the BLM protests, and it was a rude reminder that actually, superficially things may be looking better, but fundamentally, we've still got so much to do. And I think, that was also a big trigger point for me, that we're not waiting around, nothing's waiting around, our biases aren't, and therefore I'm not sitting around, waiting around. And I have a 16-year-old daughter, I'm Asian, I'm an immigrant, I'm female, and so is she. And, I have very little time to change the workplace before she gets to it. And I think, that's my reflection, that there just isn't time to pause, to slow down, or leave things to a little bit later. There's, it's like being on an escalator. If you're not moving forward, you are moving backwards on it. And I think that's my reflection of 2020. And I wish I hadn't even waited those 6 weeks or so that it took me to come to that decision of going ahead. the best part about diversity and inclusion and belonging is that there is no perfect way of doing it. You just have to keep doing something and keep moving forward. There is no perfect way because it's not possible. I don't think it's possible, at least from my experience.
Thank you, Anju. It's really powerful. Alex or Mark, do you want to share a view or?
Well, I can take it to I would take it to a different place, because I don't think I can top that in any way. For me, it'll be just interesting. We've talked about this a lot at Steps. What's going to happen between these hybrid workplaces that seem to be what the future is going to be like, and giving people more of that freedom to not have to be in the office. On one hand is a wonderful thing, and I think will help people in terms of this year has helped us all to understand, what is important in our own lives, and are there things that are outside of work that have a value that we want to kind of give time and space to. So I think cutting commutes and all of that will have some great impact on people's lives. But where I think will be very important is, how do you keep that sense of belonging and people feeling included when some people might be in the office all the time and other people might be at home? How do you not isolate, and how do you not create kind of groups that just start excluding others just because of the nature of where they are working every day? I think that's going to be a really interesting journey of where inclusion is going to go. And also, bringing, a lot of the journey was kind of looking at bringing yourself to work, and what does that mean? And, some of us feel like this year it's taken even further. You're actually in people's living rooms, for most of the time. So it's even more exposing. And I think finding that balance about bringing yourself to work to what you want to bring, and not the kind of expectation that there's no divide now between home and work. I think that will be an interesting one. But again, I think, to Anju's point, it's a journey, right? And it's going to keep changing. And every organization, I still find even now, the world has gone, it looks like in one way. BLM is something that's happened in the last year. And what does that look, a big kind of jump on that journey. But then you talk to different organizations, and they're still at such different parts of the journey of D&I, where still some organizations haven't looked at it yet. It's something that they're starting to look at. You've got other organizations that, are really quite mature in this. And so the level of conversations and what is being discussed is so much closer to the nuances that might be around intersectionality. So I think it's also, there's no blanket because of what's happened this year that organizations will be at similar places, but actually still to come in, I think, in the same way that we do, without the expectation that we will have all the answers, and we'll just have to find out. And different people and different organizations are at different places.
It's people who have innovated their way out of this crisis who have really succeeded. And I think, as Anju says, and as Alex says, that requires courage, and it requires a kind of like not knowing. It's, well, I'm going to just try it. And if it fails, great, but at least I'll have learned, rather than I'm just going to hold my cards back and just hope that everything works out fine. And I think you're right, Anju, that the waiting can be as detrimental as trying things that don't work. And it's sort of asking, well, what's the value in that innovation? And I think it's growth. And I think unless you are growing, I mean, everyone looks at the financial growth, right? Everyone's like, well, if the numbers are stacking up, then everything's going to be all right. And it's like, okay, but we also probably need to look at the well-being growth as well. And I think if your well-being is growing, your finances are going to be growing. So if you're able to keep an eye on people's well-being and how they're working together, not only are you going to have an organization that's financially doing well, but people are absolutely attracted to going to and sticking with. And that's when you have those higher levels of trust and commitment and, all of those different things that make an organization like a family, where people look out for each other and they have each other's backs.
and kind of coming full circle, if I can come back to you, Anju, just without putting you on the spot, but just interested, you know, as someone who's in a kind of global role at the moment and have obviously been very kind of innovative and pioneering in your approach thus far, and particularly in the work that we've done most recently. I just wonder if you've any sort of parting thoughts or words of wisdom to others who might be listening, who are in a similar role to you in terms of a kind of global D&I role. Any pearls of wisdom to leave us with?
I think you've said it all, but I would say, like, you know, I mean, I can't recommend you guys enough. So I have to say this in closing, that if somebody is listening in and thinking, what can they do to change the dialogue? Like, you know, speak to Steps, and honestly, you'll get something. It doesn't matter whether you end up partnering with them or not, but you'll get some insight, which will be super helpful. And if you are leading D&I globally, you know, this sort of the behavior change is a critical part of any D&I plan. I think you can do a lot with networks. You can do a lot with development in terms of female development, hiring, topics like intersectionality, all of that. But ultimately, you know, you have to have that uncomfortable conversation of changing the way things are done. And this is an excellent tool for that. Can't recommend it enough.
Thank you so much. That's lovely to hear. So thank you all so much for joining me today. It's been really, really great to hear your insight and your experience and tap into that. I'm sure it's going to be super helpful for people. And, you know, I think that the kind of spirit of the partnership that's evident here is, you know, testament to all of your passion and enthusiasm for the work you do, which really comes across in everything you've shared. So thank you so much. And I wish you all the very best for the next bit of the partnership, and look forward to hearing more from you when the chance allows. Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you, Jenny.
Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.